This is the fourth and last video of the Low and Stable Inflation Rate mini-series, which is part of the Government Macroeconomic Objectives series. In this video, I'm going to talk about possible relationships between unemployment and inflation. We're going to look at the Phillips curve, the SRPC, short-run Phillips curve, and the LRPC, the long-run Phillips curve. So let's get started. So basically, the Phillips curve is a curve that illustrates the relationship between the inflation rate on the y-axis and the unemployment rate on the x-axis. There are two Phillips curves. There's the short-run Phillips curve and the long-run Phillips curve. The Phillips curve shows that there is a possible trade-off between the unemployment rate and the inflation rate in the short run. As you can see on this short-run Phillips curve, the SRPC, when there is demand pull inflation, the inflation rate is quite high, but the unemployment rate is quite low. And when there is cyclical unemployment, the inflation rate falls because, well, there's less aggregate demand and the unemployment rate is high. Also, when there is deflation in this segment here, where the inflation rate is zero, deflation leads to an even higher unemployment rate. So in the short run, you can see there is a possible trade-off between inflation and unemployment. In the case of demand pull inflation, you have high inflation, lower unemployment. Cyclical unemployment, or like a slowing down of economic growth or a recession, you have a higher unemployment rate and a lower inflation rate. When you have deflation, you have increased unemployment. There is also a long-run Phillips curve. So there is a long-run Phillips curve that is vertical at the natural rate of unemployment. And therefore, in the long run, there is no trade-off between the unemployment rate and the inflation rate. As you can see, the LRPC is vertical at the natural rate of unemployment. If you remember, the natural rate of unemployment is the rate of unemployment that exists when the economy is producing at the full employment level of output, YFE. So that's the rate of unemployment that exists on the long-run aggregate supply curve when the economy is producing at full employment. So in the previous slide, we saw what happens when there is demand pull inflation. You move up the short-run Phillips curve. When there is cost push inflation, on the other hand, or stagflation, there is both inflation and a rise in unemployment, or a rise in the unemployment rate. Now, this is shown by a shift to the right, okay, of the short-run Phillips curve. So when you have, the short-run Phillips curve may shift outwards, resulting in stagflation, caused by a decrease in short-run aggregate supply due to factors including supply shocks. So when the short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the left, the short-run Phillips curve will shift to the right, which means there is a worsening of both the inflation rate and the unemployment rate, and there's a situation of stagflation. The Phillips curve as a model is also very useful at showing inflationary spirals. Now, we know that many economists believe that in the long run, the economy will always return to the natural rate of unemployment. So say, for example, there is some demand pull inflation, this first green arrow here. This demand pull inflation will lead to a rise in the average price level, which means that over time, the costs of production will also rise. And this will cause a shift in the short-run aggregate supply curve, and it will be a negative supply shock. So this will shift the Phillips curve outwards, which will cause the average price level to rise even further. And then if you have any more demand pull inflation, this will cause the short-run Phillips curve to shift to SRPC2. So basically, whenever there's an inflationary spiral, it can be shown by subsequent movements up the short-run Phillips curve, followed by a movement to the right, and then another upward movement and a movement to the right, and so on. Because the economy, the unemployment rate will usually, in the long run, return back to the natural rate of unemployment. Finally, supply-side policies will often lead to a lower natural rate of unemployment in the long run, and this can be seen by a shift to the right of the long-run Phillips curve, where you have a lower natural rate of unemployment.